I've played games where they don't cross the quarter line of the board because I don't let them. And if they've taken claim jump and they never get to the center, that's real hard.
Yeah,
that's very board dependent. But if you see claim jump in the pool and you're like, I know I can deny that, that's a great Euripides pool.
We have ourselves yet another Malifaux Deep Dive, this time into the Savage keyword and Euripides. My guests walk us through everything you need to know about how to run this crew. What models do they bring in their core crew? What schemes and strategies do they excel in? What are schemes you love your opponent to pick? And how do you counter this crew? I've argued that Savage is one of the underrated keywords out there. In the right hands, this crew can be devastating. So sit back, relax, and let's talk about Euripides and the Savage crew.
Third Floor Wars delivers interviews, insights, and discussions about everything hitting the tabletop. Rulebooks, plastic models, dice, and cards in hand. Let the gaming begin. Tabletop games let you escape and unleash grand battles and regale epic tales of adventure with your friends. If you love gaming and learning from players, designers, experts, and creators, you are in the right place. Pull up a chair. Craig and Ray welcome you to the Third Floor and the Tabletop Talk Podcast.
Howdy, friends. Craig here. Welcome to another Malifaux Deep Dive. We're looking at the Neverborn Master, Euripides, and his Savage crew. Our guests today are Ambrose Ingram and Lewis Phillips. Ambrose, welcome back to the Third Floor, man.
Thank you. I'm stoked to be back.
It's been a little while.
Yeah, I think it was maybe pre-pandemic that we last talked.
Oh, easily. Yeah, easily. So I know you've been playing Malifaux, but what else have you been doing gaming-wise?
So Malifaux takes up a bunch. I've been working with the committee that's running the World Series games on Vassal. So that's
nice.
There's a lot of organization that goes into that, even if I'm not TOing. But other than that, role-playing games have been filling up a lot of time. I started running a Blades in the Dark game right around the same time you did. And it's such a dope.
It's so good.
System, the system and the game mesh together to give you this awesome experience. I don't think I've read an RPG book or played a game that's been so entwined, like mechanics and lore and everything, and it runs like silk.
Yeah, I mean, everybody who listens knows I'm a John Harper fanboy. Yeah. But it's just super clever. It found a zeitgeist that, just everything came together. The table was set by the bakers with Powered by the Apocalypse, and then John just took that and tweaked it enough that it's not Powered by the Apocalypse anymore. It's its own thing. But it's really captured that, mechanics that facilitate the story.
Totally.
And it totally works. And it's changed how I run games.
Yeah.
There's things that I learned running Blades that have changed how I run Star Wars or, anything else that I run. So, when you introduced it to the players, what was their reaction?
I pitched it based on kind of how the guidelines in the book said to do it, right? I gave them the setting first and said, does this sound sweet? And obviously they were like, hell yeah, that sounds sweet as hell. and then we just jumped in, right? Like the character creation is all playbook style. So you just give them the options, like talk about the world, and that's all it really took. And it sets it up as a conversation so well that you're able to have a conversation about how the mechanics work as you run the game. And that's part of running the game. It's conversation of setting up your position and what your effect is. It just makes sure that the game gets learned as you play it. I think it's actually one of the easiest role-playing games that I've taught.
I agree. And a lot of games promise this and few deliver. Like, you can sit down and you can teach them nothing mechanically. You can hand someone a pre-gen or even help them build their character, or they can do it on their own because it's not rocket science. And you literally can say, okay, now here's our situation. Here's how the mechanics work. That takes all of 2 minutes to explain. What do you want to do? But until we get to those stopping points, just tell me what you want to do. And we'll figure it out. So, cool. So I'm glad we have an episode about Blades in the Dark going today. Maybe we should talk about Savage a little bit here. So let's shift over to Lewis. How are you, my friend? Welcome to the third floor.
Hi. Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's great to be on.
I appreciate it, man. Now, I've heard you on other pods, but this is the first time you've been on Tabletop Talk. So I need to ask the obligatory, how did you find out about tabletop gaming?
Just this, I think the same way quite a lot of people get into the hobby. I was in my teens and found Games Workshop, and then we had a guy open a local game store that wasn't a Games Workshop store here. And then he just opened all of our eyes to different systems. And I was one of the first in the Scottish meta of my friend group to pick up Malifaux, and that started with 2nd edition Jacob Lynch.
Nice.
And deciding that was a great start point, went straight into Pandora after it. And from there, Malifaux just grew as like my true love of a war game. I think it does everything it needs to.
Well, so coming from GW, I mean, I've had this conversation with a lot of people, but it's always a little bit different. What were the things, Lewis, that made you just go, holy crap, in that transition that made you realize that Malifaux was going to be your game?
Cards, not dice. Truthfully,
yeah.
Cards, not dice. Like, I understand, and I'll, like, if you ever see any of the UK chats, I'm the first one to be like, these vassal decks are rigged through the pandemic. But, like, there's just something of, like, being able to mitigate the RNG from a card flip with the hand and that sort of thing over just, oh, look, I threw all these dice and none of them landed the way I wanted to. So right now, just remove my toys from the table for me, please. At least with Malifaux, like, bar bad situations, I've got a way to mitigate what's happening to my plastic, and that's fine. I prefer that.
Well, it's another layer of agency, right?
Yeah.
And if you are playing to test yourself, it gives you another place to test yourself, another layer to dig into the game and to think about in the game. So I completely get that. So I'd be curious, though. So you talk about Warhammer, you talk about Malifaux. Is there any other mini games that you've tried and maybe ones that you still like?
I have a Minions army for Hordes because
nice.
Walking Wall of Crocodiles is just everything aesthetically that I want. And I had Guild Ball till Steamforge killed it.
Yep.
And I've been trying to... I keep buying Malifaux stuff, and I've got a big pile of shame. And it's like, oh, but look at this shiny, and now Marvel Crisis Protocol has dropped, and I'm just like... Oh no! Like I love Spider-Man, and it's like, oh well, I can just pick up Spider-Man stuff, right? And then
no,
yeah, I know, right? And then it's, but then like I'm heavy into like the Fantasy Flight LCGs and like role playing games as well. So it's like my wife will kill me if I pick another hobby game up, but
that's why you got to get a third floor, man. You just hide it from her like I do.
I've just recently finished building a shed in the garden, so
there you go. Yeah. That'll start. So what LCGs are you digging, Lewis?
So Marvel Champions, and
game.
I loved before they ended it, I had pretty much all of the Game of Thrones LCG.
Nice.
Still love that as a game, and
I always heard it was good. Never played it.
Really good. It was a good game to learn how to balance economies in a game, sort of like your resources. And then I played L5R, and that recently got killed. But L5R, there was just too much to keep up with for me as a new game. It was, they did the 6 packs in 6 weeks thing, and I was just like, this is not sustainable for me. Like. And I sort of dropped out of it at that, so then moved into sort of tying more of my time up, like yourselves, with RP games.
So that's the next question, Lewis. What are you playing and as far as RPGs?
So I'm the Dafty that volunteers to DM everything in our group. So I've got a group that I run a 5e D&D for because none of them had tried D&D bar one of them, so it was worth trying. And I also, the same group has one extra player that doesn't play D&D. I run a Through the Breach campaign for as well. But we modified Through the Breach a little bit because everybody was like, we're enjoying this. And I was like, yeah, the episodic 10 session thing was great, but it was like, what would happen if we treated these characters like D&D characters and just carried the campaign on? And it's led us to some great situations. And the one standout, and I'll just quickly rant about it, is they didn't believe me that the Mallosaurus Rex was a weird official thing, and we did the one shot where it introduces the Mallosaurus Rex, and they were just like, oh, that was really good, that was fun to play, that sort of thing. And it was literally we finished it, and then I think it was 3 or 4 days later, Weird dropped the Mallosaurus Rex preview at Gen Con.
Nice.
And they were like, we thought you made that up. And I was like, nah, man, that's a real thing. And it's a model now, so.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. Yeah, it's not, Through the Breach isn't too hard to hack. The one challenge is that I have with it, because I haven't run it yet, and I will. I like it. I think it's a good system. It's so different in a lot of ways that it can be a little tough, both for a GM and for the players. But that shouldn't stop you, because that's hackable. You don't, just like anything, you don't have to do all of it, right? You can do parts of it, and it's definitely do it. Lord knows the world is cool. So
yeah, I mean, the way I did it was, all my guys that I have in my group are part of what I call the core tournament scene around my my meta anyway. So they're all got the advantage, bar one of them, of having background knowledge on Malifaux.
It's huge, yeah.
But the way I did it was I didn't bog them down with every single mechanic straight away. We started off with this is how you do combat, for instance, and then in the next session where we had more combat, that's where I introduced the Fate Master characters having triggers based on their cards and that sort of thing. So I did it in a way that was I'm not going to overload you with information. As your characters get used to this world, you're going to find out that I'm going to start using mechanics that then toughen the world up around you, sort of thing.
That's smart. That's very, very smart. So guys, the Malifaux Deep Dives allow me to talk to players well-versed in playing certain masters and keywords. We're going to learn the basics as well as the advanced strategies, along with the key crew picks and which pools the Savage keyword does well in. By the end, I hope that we are going to get a sense of not only how to run a Savage keyword, but we're also going to learn how to counter them. We're going to take a quick break. When we get back from this break, we're going to talk about the master, Euripides, and his totem. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Brian. I started listening to Third Floor Wars for information and insight about my favorite miniatures game, Malifaux. But I also get great interviews with game writers, designers, and artists, as well as some fantastic role-playing sessions with some really great players. I've been supporting them on Patreon for 1.5 years so far, and it has been well worth it.
Right now is the part of many podcasts where someone comes on, interrupts the show, and explains that you should consider paying for the content you're already getting for free. They'll go on and explain that by giving $1 or more a month, you not only support the show, but you allow the show to grow and improve. Here on the Third Floor, we commit to not interrupting your episode of Tabletop Talk with such a plea. We pledge not to run a spot asking you to go to patreon.com and give $1 or more a month. Even if there's a link in this show's description, and there is, we won't ask you to click it and become a patron. We won't spend time yammering about the benefits like early access to episodes, getting those episodes without ad breaks, or even getting a chance to play in one of Craig's RPG sessions. Anyway, enjoy this episode. We needed to clarify that we wouldn't do this type of solicitation. Time to give a quick shout out to our most recent patrons. A big thanks goes out to John Mahoney, Philip Maska, Joshua Edwards, Clay Pierce, Peter Sojanek, King Salt Nathan, Jimmy CZ, Wayne Peacock, Oliver Borden, Zachary Wills, J. Douglas Nielsen, Patrick Healy, Hamdog, Greg Packman, Eric Conrad, Alan Cardinal, Raven Zato, and Philip Savoy. Because of you and the 100 other plus patrons, I'm able to put out content on a regular basis. We appreciate you. So before we started recording, Lewis, Ambrose, and I were talking, and I was mentioning that I called Euripides as a good master pretty early as soon as he came out. And I still see people saying that, he's not very good. I still disagree with them. I still think Euripides is an excellent master in the power curve conversation. But I think what's causing that conversation to happen is he's not the easiest master and keyword to do it. He's not plug and play. So let's start off, Ambrose, with somebody who knows nothing about Euripides. So can you give us kind of a high level understanding of the style of this master?
Yeah. So at his like most basic, just looking at stats and attacks and stuff, he's big. He's got a 3, 4, 6 damage track on his melee attack, so he can get in there and he can punch really hard. He has intuition, so he can set up some really, really nasty attacks when he's charging in or something like that.
Let's talk about intuition real quick if somebody is not clear on that mechanic. So
when you start his activation, you look at the top 3 cards of your deck, and then you can put them back in any order. And, I think in Euripides, a lot of times you're fishing for that red joker. We'll talk about Thune later, but Thune has intuition as well. And with 2 intuition models in the deck, and your ability to control what cards you're flipping with the old ways, you really are trying to get to a spot where Euripides comes in and hits for severe without costing you cards in hand.
For my Reser players out there, imagine having a Whisper stapled to stapled to it. We all know how good Whisper is for Resers. Euripides and Thune have it. And that's not the only deck manipulation on there. So can we talk about the old ways?
Absolutely. So old ways, whenever you're flipping a duel, if it's a straight flip, you can take a point of damage and use the top card of your discard pile instead.
It's so good.
It's amazing. I mean, I think that people who pick Euripides up for the first time and they go through and they're using old ways a bunch and they see their models melting down in front of them. But really, this is take a point of damage to flip a severe. Take a point of damage to not flip the black joker. Take a point of damage to pass a simple duel. That's worth it. That's huge value. And this is on almost everything in the crew. So this is probably the most fundamental keyword ability for Euripides. I know like ice pillars are a big part of it, but right. Ice pillars are honestly an incidental strength, and the way that you're winning games is through the old ways, and we're going to talk about it a ton.
Yeah. So Lewis, I'd be curious. I feel like the key to the old ways is knowing when not to use it. Do you think that's accurate?
Definitely. But at the same time, I use it as much as I can. I try to ensure that if there's a risk of me failing something, I'm not going to fail it, because the stronger my deck is. So if something only needs, like the Primordial Magic, it only needs a 5 to turn one of my models incorporeal. If I'm sitting with a 5 and I've not seen my Black Joker, that incorporeal could affect my entire turn, because the whole crew is on, like, the majority of the crew is on a 50 mil base, and in some deployment types that's not ideal. So if I can take a point of damage on my totem to then turn my master incorporeal, so he's not going to be slowed down, or the Thune incorporeal, so he's not going to be slowed down by terrain, I'm going to take that point of damage, because you're negating some of the RNG of the game by seeing what you're going to flip rather than... and just quickly, while we're on the old ways, I do think that the Gaining Grounds change to Distracted and Focus actually makes it better. because it wasn't entirely clear before whether they did cancel each other out or if you just had a positive and a minus to fate modifier. Now they just straight out cancel, so there's no arguments about it. You can use it as long as there's no fate modifier.
Yeah, and one of the things that I'd heard being talked about is that that it's a little, focus is a little too good. And I thought that those were legitimate conversations. I don't think that focus was like breaking the game. But this one small tweak did two things. One, it brought focus back under control again. But more importantly, it helped with distracted because there were so many models and crews that depended on distracted that just weren't seeing the table. And with one small tweak, both things were taken. I did people that listen to my little bonus episode that I dropped right when Gaining Grounds 2 came out. This is a perfect example of what I was talking about when I put out that episode, which is it's going to take time for us to really see what the impact is because it's not apparent. The first time you read about the changes to distraction, you're like, okay, no big deal. And then trust me, next time you play against Colette or next time you play against Seamus and you see distracted now, you're gonna be like, holy shit, like it's totally different. And you just can't read that off of it. So Lewis, for someone listening, what style would someone want or enjoy in order to enjoy Euripides? So what kind of style player would get this?
I think he's definitely, because of his ice pillar play, he can control the board. So if you like to control your opponent's movement and that sort of thing, you're going to get a lot of fun out of Euripides. But also, if you just like big meaty boys that hit like trucks, you're getting a crew of them. Like nothing in the crew doesn't hit like a freight train, and it's all decently statted as well. And the crew is more expensive because of it, but it definitely makes up for it in the way it can slap models about. I was going to say, which the old ways plays into, because there's less mitigation, because you tend to have less models as a Euripides player because they all hit a bit harder and they all cost a bit more. So you can use the old ways to then mitigate the lack of sometimes what can be options for you by just being like, well, I'll just use that 12.
Well, and something else that's kind of a second layer, and this applies to any elite crew, and it's something I don't hear people talk about, is how do I put it? The deck can be swingy on a small crew. And the reason is you're not seeing your whole deck, and you're not seeing your whole deck from an offensive standpoint and a defensive standpoint. And it's why with an elite crew, any type of card manipulation is a big deal. If I'm running a large crew, I'm going to see my whole deck just by the nature of the fact that I've got a ton of models and they're going to get attacked and they're going to attack. And I'm going to flip a shipload of cards. But with a Euripides crew, I could do a whole turn and only see, half my deck. And depending on how things shuffle, that could have a huge impact. So I completely agree with you, Lewis. Ambrose, let's talk about defensive tech. What's keeping Euripides from melting?
Hit points. He's got 14, and he could go down. He's big and he's a tank, but he definitely is susceptible to getting focused down. He does have hard to kill, which is another thing that is going to carry through a lot of the keyword. And I think that when you do start talking about the ice pillar play, and as Lewis said, right, like you can control the movement and all of that, controlling where your opponents go on the board, your goal is to make them waste far more actions than they need to accomplish their goals. And putting an ice pillar in the way is part of that. Hard to kill is part of that, right? You can have a Cyclops that's defense 4 and 7 hit points, and I don't care who you are, you're taking at least 2 actions to kill that model.
Yeah, and impacting that action economy of your opponent, it can be absolutely huge. And we'll get into it when we talk about the crew, but there's some wonderful action economy within the crew as well. So that becomes a double whammy. So now that we've got a better sense of Euripides and really got a feel for it, I think that sometimes when I do these deep dives, I like to spend a lot of time talking about the master, but he's a context master. So let's go ahead and take a quick break. When we get back from this break, I want to talk about him in the context of the crew. So we're going to find out how Lewis and Ambrose like to build a savage crew. We'll be right back. There are so many online retailers. It can be hard to find one that is trustworthy, has great prices, along with some reliable customer service. On the third floor, we love ordering our gaming goodies from Gadzooks Gaming. Their selection of terrain, miniatures, dice, custom decor, and conversion bits are curated for gamers by gamers. You'll find they have what you need and what you didn't know you needed to take your gaming fun to the next level. If you mention Third Floor Wars in the cart notes of your order, you'll also get a free gift. And you'll help support the podcast. Check out gadzooksgaming.com and mention Third Floor Wars on checkout to get that free gift. So obviously when we're, sitting down and we've declared Savage and we're going to bring you Euripides, the first thing we're going to hire is the totem. So can we talk about Primordial real quick?
Yeah, so the Primordial is a great carryover from second edition, and I mean it brings Arcane Reservoir to the crew. That's its most important thing. It's got low stats. It's defense 4, willpower 4, 3 wounds. But like most of the Neverborn totems, is significant, and the amount of times you can be halfway through a game and like you just go to yourself, you set it up and lay a scheme marker, and your opponent's like, "Oh, is it significant?" And you're like, "Yeah, it really is." And it often for me, it spends its game turning it can turn one savage model a turn incorporeal off its bonus action. For a 5, as I said earlier, and for me it just usually walks behind either the Foon or Euripides, whoever's likely to be in the fight, turning them incorporeal, giving them extra defenses that way. But it also has an 8-inch remove scheme markers. The remove scheme markers isn't built in, but it's an 8-inch tactical that can remove scrap, scheme, and corpse markers next to an ice pillar. That also deals 1 damage to all non-savage models. So if your opponent doesn't know that's coming and they set up, say, a research mission or the new one, Deathbeds, you just go, and now they're gone. And
it's worth saving the card for.
Oh, 100%. It's even better if you've got it on top of your deck, on top of your discard pile, because then for a wound, why would you not remove the enemy scheme markers and deal them a point of damage?
So after we bring the Primordial in, Lewis, what is your first hire?
My first hire is always a Cyclops. I know that a lot of people think they can be subpar, but a Cyclops for me is the first thing you hire. It brings ranged scheme marker dropping, ranged healing, ranged unresisted damage, can hand out staggered all off the same bonus action. You have to pick one, but that's fine. And its Ice Pillar creation is a further range than Euripides, so you can sort of set it up from the backfield and keep your defense 4 model safe. And often I will attach Ancient Pact to it because it is a minion. So create an Ice Pillar, draw a card at the end of activation, and everything else on it is, on Ancient Pact is gravy, but drawing the card is...
That's a big deal. And a big deal, and it ties into what we were talking about how important getting access to the deck is for Euripides. So I'd be curious, Lewis, I mean, because I've heard people kind of, lay dirt on Cyclops. What do you think people that don't like the Cyclops or think they're overpriced are missing?
So the one argument you often see against the Cyclops is, for a similar cost, 2 changelings can copy Euripides' Ice Pillar creation, and you get more Ice Pillars. The problem with that is changelings are 4 wounds and don't have hard to kill, and they can't manipulate my deck the same way that a Cyclops can. If I can use the tome from my discard pile, I guarantee an Ice Pillar that's further than the ones the changelings can lay. Not only that, is if it gets into a fight, unlike the changelings, it's still got a 3-4-5 damage track with a grit ability to gain positives if it's below half wounds.
Well, and it's savage, and there's benefits to being savage in a savage crew, so I completely get that. How about you, Ambrose? Do you ever run your Euripides without a Cyclops?
I probably have, but that was a mistake.
And regretted it?
Yeah. You need one for all the reasons that Lewis said. We should talk about Frozen Vigor, too, before we get too far into the minions. So that's Euripides himself doesn't have it, but when a model ends within 2 inches of an ice pillar, you're going to get shielded and healed 1. So this synergizes with the old ways. If you're doing old ways next to ice pillars and you're in your turn there, like you're getting that benefit for free. It synergizes with hard to kill. Because you could so many times, right? Like that's a defense 4 Cyclops. Someone comes in, they don't get it because I, manipulate the top of my discard pile to put them on negatives the entire time. They get it down to 1 wound. I activate the Cyclops. Now it's back up to 2 with the shielded, and it survives the game, right? Like it's surprisingly hard to put down. You could do it, right? Like don't get me wrong. The person who knows how to get around it's a killable model. But if the point of the game is to make people waste activations on killing your models, the defense doesn't matter. You can still force those actions.
Well, and it's again hitting that economy, right, and forcing that economy to your point earlier, Ambrose. So after a Cyclops, is it? Are we going right to Thune?
Yeah.
Who's next then?
Thune, then the Damned.
Oh, okay. Well, let's hold off on Thune. I want to hear about the Damned.
So I will hold my hands up. I was one of the players that until the Explorer Society released, I had Serena in my crew, right? I was that one of them players. I had Serena for the reasons we were just talking about. Frozen Vigor, she could heal my models back up over there hard to kill, and I could survive fights I probably shouldn't have, in all fairness. Then a Savage model dropped that doesn't heal the same way as Serena, but in my opinion heals better.
Right, for this crew.
Than Serena. For this crew, right. Yes. So the Damned has Toss the Scrap, so that if he kills a model with a melee action, a friendly model within 6 or a 6 can heal 2. Now, that's massive because everything in the Savage crew bar 2 models is height 3 or more. Mm-hmm. So those auras are very rarely getting blocked. Yep. And as I say, it could put Cyclops that's on its hard to kill back above hard to kill if it's within 6 of the Damned. And whereas Serena was only I think Serena is 3 inches. So she has to put herself in danger there to go over and heal it. But not only that then triggers the Damned's other cool ability, which is Chronicle. When a model, once per activation, when a model would heal, all enemy models within 1 of it take 1 damage. So it basically gives the Savage crew, a black blood splash. And that to me is amazing because it's I'm going to hit you like a freight train, and then if I kill you, I'm going to damage your friends over there that are holding up my support piece or because Euripides and the Thune can, because they're on a 50 mil base, can find themselves in a fight with 2 or 3 models at a time trying to take them out. So splashing extra points of damage out everywhere is just fantastic. And it's got a suited leap, which is rare in the game now.
Yeah, very, especially since gaining grounds.
Yeah, so it gives you a Scheme Runner that isn't a Bulltungen, that is maybe on the squishy side.
So how about you, Ambrose? Are you on the damn train?
Yeah. Yep, definitely. I think I don't necessarily bring it every time, but at this point, when I bring Euripides, I do want I want that mobility. Euripides himself and the Gigants have pseudo-lit leaps through their Shattering Surprise trigger. And so with the Damned and Euripides able to cross the board, you could just go from one flank to the other. That's the reason I'm bringing this crew a lot of times. I think their ability to reposition your key pieces as a group is very, very high, even in a fairly mobile faction.
Yeah, no, I agree. So we keep dodging him because he's the boogeyman. But Ambrose, talk to me about Thune. Why do people hate Thune? Not the people that play Thune. Why do the people playing against Thune hate him so much?
So it's his frozen trophy, right? And it's a tome on his melee attack that you create an ice pillar adjacent to the model you hit, you bury the model you hit, and then that model doesn't come back until that ice pillar is broken. It's a frozen trophy, right? You've entombed something in ice. And that can be that can win games. If you get the right frozen trophy off, you might have just won. You combine that with one of Euripides' tactical actions, which is Glacial Shove. That then pushes an ice pillar 10 inches. So the key play that people are afraid of is Thune coming in, frozen trophying your beater or your master, and then Euripides, coming in at the start of the next turn before you have a chance to activate, and you push that ice pillar 10 inches into your deployment zone. And now they can't use that model. They have to overextend to get it out, or they're losing so much AP over the course of the game. I think that Thune pays a price for that trigger. He's nine stones, right? Yeah,
he's expensive.
Yeah. He's 9 stones. He's only 2 AP. He is defense 6 and he is move 6. So especially when combined with primordial magic, he can get around the board. And he's hard to put down. He's got the frozen vigor. He's got the hard to kill. But he's not min 3. He's a min 2. He has some other good triggers on there, and he has some ability to manipulate ice pillars as well. So when he starts his activation, he can push 4 inches. He also has intuition, like we said.
Yep.
And there's a lot of times where you can get that frozen trophy. You look in the top, you see a 13. You stone for a tome. There's nothing that person can do to stop you from trophying their model. But he's 9 stones, 2 AP. His bonus creates an ice pillar off of a corpse. But for a 9-stone model, he's definitely suffering the action economy game because he has the ability to remove so much agency from the opponent.
Yeah, and obviously we're not at the counter section of the podcast yet, but the one thing that I learned going up against, I learned it the hard way, is sometimes when you crew build, you think about, this is going to be a key piece for me, right? This is going to be the piece that wins me the game, and when you are going up against Euripides, you have to be a little smarter about your crew builds going up against Euripides, and you have to say, I can't have one key piece. I need to have redundancy for the exact reason that we've just talked about. Though Thune can go down to focused fire just like any other model can. And the nightmare that you talked about with Euripides pushing the pillar, that sounds just so horrible. When we theory foe. Because when we theory foe, we forget about terrain. We forget about, activation orders. We forget about the fact that you're on the table at the same time that Thune and Euripides are. So it does happen, but we tend to think it's always going to happen as a Euripides player, and it's always going to happen against us as the other player. And that's often not the case. So I think that that's significant.
I have another comment about Thune, actually, if that's all right. So my meta figured it out, right? I started playing Euripides. I started pillaring things. They figured out that was happening. And so I stopped bringing him. And then they were over-teching, right? They were bringing all this blow it to hell on models that weren't really efficient. And, they were bringing all these weak little minions. So they had extra actions. And I just ran a very attrition, like we were saying, right? Waste their actions. And I didn't rely on the trophy. And suddenly they didn't know what to do, right? Like they couldn't count on me bringing that anymore. And that was enough to make it good again. But you do not need frozen trophy for this keyword to be good. And I think that's gotten more true as more models for Savage came out. So I think there was a period of time where you were very limited as a Euripides player because there was some strong models like Lissa and stuff that hadn't come out yet. But now that we've got all the Savage models released and you can buy them and paint them and put them on the table, I think that changes things considerably. How about you, Lewis? What are some models that we need to get some lip service to when we talk about building a Savage crew?
I think there's going to be a pronunciation thing between the US and the UK. It's the Gayons. I love these models. They're an 8 stone, 8 wound minion, and they are a 3/4/6 damage track with a 2-inch engagement range.
So good.
Yeah. And they've got extended reach, so you just stand them next to your models and you go, well, within 2 inches of me, you can't take a charge attack. And then you realize they're on a 50 mil base as well, so then like that 2 inches is actually bigger than 2 inches. Then and this is an action that I've used to such effect, and if it catches your opponent off guard, like you have to tell them that it's like it does it. So they can eat ice pillars within 4 inches of themselves to heal 2 for every ice pillar they destroy. Now, the amount of times you can bog your opponent in with ice pillars and then they have to focus on this roadblock that's in front of them, and then the roadblock just goes, and now I heal to full by absorbing everything that was slowing you down. And as I said, it hits like a bus. It's 3/4/6. It can make you slow on a trigger. It's got heave, or yeet as I like to call it, and place you within 3 inches of itself. Or if it can kill the model, it's got swallow you whole. And there's just so much about this model that you just go, it's got old ways and frozen vigor. So if you can keep it above the article, these you pay for them. They're 8 stones. But they are going to do the work of henchmen from other crews, like beta henchmen. They're going to do the work of them.
Yeah, and they, I think that's thematically what we, know about Savage is the models are good. The models are good, but you pay for it, right?
Oh yeah, 100%.
And there's good things about having an elite crew, and there's drawbacks to having an elite crew. And one of them has to do with when we get to the next segment about the pools, right? As strong as Euripides is, there are many pools where Euripides is not the best pick as a Neverborn player. And I think part of understanding Neverborn is knowing that. The other thing that drives me nuts is when I hear about, people complaining that Neverborn isn't very good. And I'm like, well, then you don't have a good Neverborn player in your meta. And if you're that person, then you're not a good Neverborn player, because quite frankly, I think Neverborn has some of the most balanced options of all the factions. I think that they have got a lot of good options, even post Dreamer errata and post Serena errata. I think that they remind me a little bit of Arcanists in that way. It's another thing I envy about Arcanists is I think Arcanists also have so many viable options compared to a lot of other factions. It's a flatter power curve within the faction, which is a good thing, not a bad thing. So guys, let's go ahead and take a quick, actually, before we do this, you know what? I didn't even talk about upgrades. Ambrose, can we talk about upgrades?
Yeah. They're all good.
Speaking of things about Neverborn that piss me off.
No, so this is one that Lewis turned me on to, actually. Our Black Sheep upgrade, Eldritch Magic, is great in this crew. And it's because of the final veil, right? Something dies, this model heals 1. That ping healing with hard to kill is enough. You can put it on Euripides, you can put it on a Garyon, you can put it on a Cyclops. I like having it on Cyclopses because of the Dispel Magic. I do not want Euripides to get stunned. It shuts off his Shattering Surprise. It shuts off his Frozen Domain trigger to create additional ice pillars. That's a bad time, and so I like having. If I'm not having Serena, then I like having Eldritch Magic on a minion or just another model for that reason. Ancient Pact works phenomenally with the old ways, right? Drawing more cards is better when you're able to recycle them. I have put that on Cyclopses as well. I'm also a bigger fan of Gigants than I know Lewis is. So they're the 6-point model. Like I said, they've got that Shattering Surprise trigger so they can cross the board. That's on a bonus action that shuts down interact actions within 2 inches of an ice pillar until the end of the turn. So I'm a big fan of that as a denial piece, right? I could be 8 inches away from the center or the edge of the board where I know that you have an objective, and I can still stop you from interacting there. and that's huge. They also have a stat 6 gun with stunning strike on it, and expert shot, and the ability to ignore line of sight. And so stun is the best condition in the game. So
it's good.
I think 2 Gigants with Ancient Pacts was one of my first go-tos in this crew, and I've kind of, explored more options since then. But if you're looking for just, here's a solid, sit back and get put damage down, drawing extra cards is a nice crutch for learning this crew. It lets you really see how the old ways works, and I like having those Ancient Pacts on the Gigants so that I can cycle and find tomes for my Cyclops. So I know Lewis said Ancient Pact on the Cyclops before, but I like having it on a Gigant so that card can feed the Cyclops.
So, Ambrose, is there any other Savage models we haven't talked about, or maybe even some out of keyword models that Euripides players are yelling at us right now, listening because we haven't mentioned?
I think we've talked about the big 3 minions, but I'm a big fan of Lysa.
Agree.
Bring It is phenomenal, and Bring It's on a stat 5 for a 4-point model. It's 5 willpower, 5 defense. It's incorporeal. It has Frozen Vigor, so you can get that shield on it, and now you're stat 5, shielded incorporeal. For 4 points, that can be very hard to put down.
I think just having a keyword model at 4 points is a big
and that's a significant 4-point model. That's you're getting to where you need to go. You're a little hard to kill, and you can drop schemes. I'd say the biggest thing I'm bringing them for, though, is repositioning Thune, especially when I'm going into like Nekima or Von Stuk can be very hard, and a good Von Stuk player is very hard for this to deal with. But the way that you deal with it is abusing Frozen Trophy, and keep your Thune safe until they've overextended, and then bring Thune in with Lysa. So I know Lewis also likes Boltungan in the crew, so he should probably say something about that.
Oh yes, talk to me about Boltungan.
I do like Boltungan, and I don't run them often. I tend to only run them in symbols games. Because 2 Boltungan and then the Damned going up a flank each, your opponent then just has... Because Boltungan are move 6, and if there's 2 of them running, they boost each other's jewels by 1 because of pack mentality and that sort of thing. And then they can combo with each other. So if one hits and you hit a high mask, the other one can hit with coordinated attack, and you can sort of... Anything that comes to stop you... 2 Boltungan. The other reason I like them in symbols is because when I remember it, they've got Deadly Pursuit.
Yeah.
And so you can end like your 12-inch walk and hopefully be within 4 inches of the symbol. So next turn you can slide in. What I will say, going back to it though, is Ambrose said I'm not a giant fan of the Gigants. I am more of a fan of them now in Gaining Grounds 2 with the changes to, say, like Outflank, where you're going to need to place a scheme marker now, so I'm going to put an ice pillar there and stop you, sort of thing. You can't interact around the table edges and that sort of thing. So I think their stock goes up a big way in Gaining Grounds 2.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, like I said, it's only been out for a couple days now while we're recording this, but that's another thing that's going to happen in 6 months from now, guys, is we're going to realize that there's models that we have literally forgot about. And that suddenly we're going to go, oh, wait a second. And you're going to pull that card out again in the context of getting a couple Gaining Grounds 2 games under your belt. And you're going to go, holy crap, like this is really good now. And, you'll have to shake the dust off. But that's going to take time. And that's okay. That's part of what, this game is a complicated game in a good way. Intricate is a better word than complicated. So guys, let's take a quick break. When we get back from this break, we're going to talk about the pools. And that includes Gaining Grounds 2. We'll be right back. Howdy folks, Craig here. Now if you love gadgets as much as we do, you're going to love the new Third Floor Wars Gadget Bundle from Schooner Labs. Branded with the logo of your favorite podcast, it comes with 2 measuring multi-tools, a compass stepper for those tight and important movements, along with a compact dashboard to track your turn, strat, and scheme scoring along with your soul stones and pass tokens. It is the perfect bundle for anyone who plays Malifaux or just wants to look cool while doing it. The link is in the show notes. Check them out and help support your favorite gaming podcast. So during the break, Lewis said, "Oh, Craig, I forgot about something because I steamrolled into the break." So, Lewis, what is something key that we need to mention before we move on to the pools?
So it was just to bring up a point about what Ambrose was saying about Eldritch Magic. I'm a big defender of it on the forums and on Discord and that sort of thing. A lot of people give me quite a lot of unsubstantiated, no, you're wrong, for taking this upgrade. Now, we've gone over the importance of the old ways on Euripides. Now, he's a size 4 model, so when something dies to your freight train crew, you gain a point back off Euripides. Then that's an extra wound for an extra resource for an extra use of the old ways. And it is so... I can safely say that I've played close to 100 games of Euripides, and I could probably count on one hand the amount of times I've lost him. Once to English Ivan, and I'm not impressed about that, but that's another conversation. But I've had opponents tell me across the table that once they see what Eldritch Magic does and that Euripides is hard to kill and 14 wounds, they just go, well, Assassinate is a dead scheme.
Yeah.
Because, you'll score 1 point for it, but then you play that in with the Damned, like I was saying earlier, where if something dies out of activation, Euripides heals, then he Black Bloods damage into the models around him. And if you've got a model on 1 wound and I kill something else and Euripides heals and then I kill that, he heals another one because it's not restricted to once. And I've seen him go from like 3 wounds back up to 4 wounds in a turn.
And there's other crews and models out there that this is true of, but I think it's especially true, and you make a good point, Lewis, is wounds are an additional resource with this crew, that it's not just what keeps the model on the table, it's what allows the model to use some of its special abilities, right? And it's another resource. So what that turns into is suddenly healing is doing 2 things. It's keeping, and third thing now, because they've all got freaking hard to kill, but it's keeping them on the table. And it's allowing you to flex the old ways even more, which is good for you, bad for your opponent. And there's no other way around it. So I think that's a great point. So we've got a new pool of strategies, Lewis, and I want to know if you've had a chance to really look at them in the context of Euripides. Is there a particular strategy now that Euripides immediately jumps to the top of the list as a potential hire?
I mean, I've always been a great believer of he can be played into any pool. I think he's got that generalist play style about him that you could bring him to any pool and be comfortable. Apart from the new strategy, I think he might struggle with that. But I still think Symbols and Turf War are the 2 go-tos for him in this. I've been vocal. I've said that I think the lack of like an outright killing scheme hurts Euripides' strategy. Hurts Euripides a little bit because you're a crew of freight trains and you just want to delete models, but I'm definitely Symbols and Turf War. I'm going with the Giants 9 times out of 10.
Yeah, and let's be honest, especially in this pool, and I'm not going to gush about it, but I think these are the collection of the 4 best strategies we've seen in the game personally, and we'll see if that ends up being a good hot take of mine or not. With time tells, but in each one of these, killing your opponent is a viable option for scoring or denying, right? I mean, the one thing that people forget very easily is denying a strategy point is the same as scoring a strategy point by the nature of how strategy points work. It's not necessarily true of schemes. Killing a model is viable for winning any of these 4 strategies. So unfortunately for your Euripides player, you don't get the double up, which is part of the problem that, I didn't like about Public Enemy.
Yeah, I think with Break the Line, the new one, I think if I'm bringing Euripides, I think I'm playing it to deny it by just shutting the markers off with Ice Pillars. I don't think I'm I think you might struggle to score like 4 points from it, where you can comfortably score 4 points from other strats. I think there's not enough AP to go around in an elite crew sometimes with Break the Line.
It's going to be expensive from an action economy standpoint to score all 4 points in this one, especially if your opponent is putting any level of effort into denial. So I don't disagree with you at all, Lewis. So how about you, Ambrose? Where do you think Euripides is the shining star in this new Gaining Grounds?
I do like him for symbols, like Lewis said. Would take him in Break the Line.
Well, let's talk about it. Let's talk about what does Euripides bring to the table for Break the Line?
So I think that a oops all minions list does work if you're willing to drop Thune, and you can hit 8 or 9 models, most of which have hard to kill. And I think that if you do that, and especially if you lean heavily on the Garyon, who of course are extended reach and 2-inch reach, you grab 2 of these markers and drive them in, and then stop your opponent from getting to you. I think you can get 4 if you go that route. I've only tried it once and it worked okay. So it's something that I might need to work on, right? But the reason that I like it is all of these, as we were saying about the Gigants earlier, their efficacy in this packet went up because of all the interacts that are needed across the board, and being able to take my Break the Line marker and push it forward, and then I have a Gigant say, you can't move that one unless you break this marker. If they're already strapped for AP because of everything I'm doing, and now they have to break that marker in order to interact and push their little bucket, then I think that works out well.
Yeah, there's some interesting tools there. And obviously I don't play Euripides, so I could be completely wrong on this. But my other thought is, with this strategy, I know how I'm going to attack it, which is I'm going to, have models that are set and their job is to move markers to gain me points. And then I'm going to hire some models to cause problems, right? Ones that are going to cause problems. What's neat and interesting about Savage is I think that my secondary models I would pick in Savage are going to cause more problems than, say, my secondary choices in other keywords. Because I do think that there's some tech there and some toughness there in Savage that's going to make make my opponent's life a little bit more difficult. But there's some downsides to it as well. But I do think, and pillars are a part of it too, as part of that denial. I think it's hard to say. I don't think either of you are wrong yet. I think we still need to figure it out. I think we could find a situation where Ambrose, 6 months from now goes, yeah, what a bad call on my part. Or Lewis could very easily say, you know what, on the podcast, I said it was bad, and now I'm whooping ass. So we'll see.
In fairness, with what Ambrose just said, I hadn't even considered the Gigants, with the shutting off and I'm just sitting here going, oh no, man, he's right. He's absolutely right. I'm sitting here already, and I'm going, oh man, I didn't see that. So yeah, no, I'm sold on it already.
Yeah, I'm gonna beat this damn drum till I get in trouble for it. We don't freaking know yet, right? You gotta let this marinate. Even you play testers out there that have been play testing this for 4 months, even you guys don't know yet. It's gonna take some time, and it's gonna take us getting more games in to work through it. How about schemes, Lewis? Are there any schemes when they show up in this new pools that you go, oh boy, yeah, I'm definitely taking this?
Deathbeds and Research Mission. I'm not even gonna hide that. Deathbeds and Research Mission are 2 of the schemes that I think Euripides does so well.
And Cyclops makes them, at least 1 point is almost an auto point because of the Ice Pillar, drop a scheme marker right next to it. That's now kill something. No problem. Yeah.
I don't think there was the first level, but that second level is a good point, Ambrose. I hadn't even thought about is that then they have the killing power to get that third marker.
Yeah, it's real. Those 2 are, and because both of those are in this packet, I think that it's another reason why Euripides is probably going to get more play this season. I think that he's most pools are going to have one of those two, and if you hit a pool that has both of them, you just ching.
I know what schemes I'm going to take. You know what schemes I'm going to take, and I'm still going to score them.
Right, exactly. I also want to say on Research Mission, I think Titania struggles on her second point because she's a lot of times, I think she's even more elite than Euripides is. And I mentioned before, leaning into Gigants can get you that extra model on the board. I think Euripides is more likely to have 3 models at the end of the game to score the second point of Research Mission. And I think it's a very good, I think it's better for him than it is for Titania.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I think that's valid. How about for you, Ambrose? What are some other ones outside of these two that you think are juicy for a Savage?
If you do like Gigants, I think Hidden Martyrs is great. They're 6 points and 6 wounds. They've got the hard to kill thing going on. You're going to lose one. Period. But if you have to, they've got that Shattering Surprise, so your second one has a much better chance of survival. And I think that can work out really well. You can also, your totem is significant. You can throw that in there with like a Garyon.
The Foon.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, throw it in with the Foon because everybody beelines for the Foon. And then you're just like, I'm going to keep this support freestone model at the back and everything in your crew costs more. So...
Oh, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. And yeah, I mean, the first thing I thought about Hidden Martyrs too, because the first thing is having played against frickin' Savage is like it's real easy to make one model a huge pain in your opponent's ass.
Yep.
So that even if they weren't planning on putting that model high on the priority list, target priority list, you can force that issue.
Yep.
And they can either, even if they know or suspect that you've taken Hidden Martyrs on it, they're in a situation where like, look, I'm just gonna have to let them get the points for this scheme because if I don't get rid of this model, I am going to lose this game.
Totally.
And it's interesting how you can impose your will. And this gets into the smaller crew size. It gets into how well the keyword works together. As soon as you said that, Ambrose, I was like nodded my head. I'm like, yeah, I hadn't even thought about that either. I'd be curious though, Ambrose, if I was playing against Savage. So you declare Savage, I'm at the table. What are some dead schemes? What are some schemes where I just need to go, look, he declared Euripides, so I'm not picking this as my scheme?
I think Outflank, and we've mentioned this already, but there's so many ways for Euripides to deny that. Even if it's just having a Gigant on the board and throwing a pillar out there and saying you can't interact here. But he's also got, so we haven't talked a lot about his actual ice pillar creation, right? But it's I think he needs a 6 to go off.
A 6,
a 6, yeah. And so when you create the ice pillar, there's a little pulse. They have to make a TN 14 move duel or take 2 damage. And 14's really hard for a lot of things. You can stagger stuff with the Cyclopses unresisted on the bonus action. So if you need
and with the Lissa.
Yeah. And with the Lissa, exactly. But so one of the triggers on his ice pillar creation is blown back. So you can, you don't have to be anywhere near that flank of the board, and you can drop down an ice pillar with the blown back trigger and they're getting pushed off. You can do that with his Glacial Shove as well, and then the TN is 10 plus your stat. No, it's card plus your stats. So stat 6 plus whatever card you flip. So that might be a 19 move duel, right? No, you're not getting that. You can guarantee push something off a point with a Glacial Shove and blown back. And so that outflank, and I think anything that requires positioning, if you're trying to get Research Mission, outflank, I think those are the big ones that are just going to be really hard.
You've got ranged scheme removal,
yes.
Right? Which is again makes Research Mission less tantalizing, as well as a few others. Lewis, is there any other schemes that you would love your opponent to pick when you're playing Savage?
Assassinate, because
because
I like I said, it's just personal experience, but he doesn't go down often.
Yeah,
a lot of times, my opponent will score 1 point for it, but if you're scoring 1 point I don't think you're going to score the second. Claim jump as well, because a lot of this crew has bigger engagement ranges, so you can deny points and
you can jam it up.
Yeah.
And you could just stop them from getting to the center with ice pillars. You know, I've played games where they don't cross the quarter line of the board because I don't let them. And if they've taken claim jump and they never get to the center, that's real hard.
Yeah,
that's very board dependent. But, you know, if you see claim jump in the pool and you're like, I know I can deny that, that's a great Euripides pool.
That's great. So, guys, let's take a quick break. When we get back from this break, we're going to get to everybody's favorite part of a deep dive. We're going to talk about second level play and then how to counter this crew. We'll be right back. Howdy friends, Craig here. Nothing makes Malifaux easier than having the right tools. Here at the third floor, we love all the licensed Malifaux goodies from Custom Meeple. Not only are they helping support this podcast, they sell custom-made weird licensed tokens and terrain. They sell it all. Crew boxes, terrain, markers, tokens, and even a 3x3 full Malifaux board. Custom Meeple sells a complete M3E token set covering every marker and token you need to play. Custom Meeple are the source for the official accessories for Malifaux. Everything is designed by hand and authorized by Weird Games. Check them out at custommeeple.com, that's with one M, or follow the link in the show notes. Up your Malifaux game and be sure to tell them Craig from the third floor sent you. If you use the promo code Third Floor Friend, all one word, THIRD-FLOORFRIEND, you'll get a 5% discount and help support the podcast. It's valid on everything except retail products and playmats. I think every keyword has second level play. So don't misinterpret what I'm about to say. But I think it is especially true with this crew. And it's not just, hidden strengths, which we're going to talk about, but I think it's practice. I think in order to be effective with Euripides, you need to get games with Euripides in. And believe it or not, I think you need to get games with Euripides in when you don't even have another opponent at the table. I think you need to pull the models out and you need to practice with Euripides to be well at it. So Ambrose, let's talk about second level play. So once you got 10, 15, 20 games of Euripides in, and what did you figure out about Savage that wasn't apparent at the beginning?
I think we've talked about the old ways a lot, right? But managing that is the most important thing. And I realized probably around that 10 game mark that I was winning games when I'm using it the most. And in Vassal, it's really easy, right? It's really easy to see when it's going off a lot because you can't move it to the bottom of the discard pile. So you're putting it in this removed from game pile. So when I'm seeing like 7 cards there at the end of the turn, I look at the board and I'm like, oh yeah, I won this turn, right? Like this turn swung in my favor. And it's because the old ways is kind of a fortune multiplier. That really bad feeling when your opponent flips severe on a neg flip, right? For Savage, that's even worse because now that's another severe that they're flipping. You know, they didn't waste that second severe. They get to flip it again. And setting up as much as possible to maximize those moments is very important. And there is a thing that you need to know when not to do it. But you're looking for opportunities to let the deck swing your way. And those are where your blowouts come from, right? Like there are some games that people play against at Savage and it just nothing goes their way because I flipped 15 severes when there's 12 in the deck, that's a huge thing. And you this is why intuition is so good in the context. You are fishing for that red joker on Euripides or on Thune. Like if you're halfway through the game and you haven't seen your red yet, there's a decent chance it's in the top 3 cards. Let's try and set that up.
Well, and you're going to get double duty out of it too, right?
Exactly.
Because of, what we've been talking about. And here's something too, I think for people to keep in mind. This took me a little while to realize is, you got to pay attention to the top of your opponent's deck when you're playing against Euripides. And it's easy to not do that because it has to impact on your activations, what you're going to do.
Yep.
So if you're thinking, I need to go in and I need to take this model out, pay attention. Not only before you make that decision, but while you're making that decision. So we'll charge, do our first attack and go, okay, all right, I'm going to just attack again. Well, check the top of the deck. Right. Look at the top of the deck. Maybe that's not the move. And I think that's super important. How about for you, Lewis? What are some things that are hidden inside a Savage that maybe we haven't talked about yet, or people aren't going to see at first?
Again, it does come back to like the old ways, but beware the Euripides player that has got Ancient Pact in his crew, right? Because, and anecdotal evidence here, obviously, but I played a game in one of the Vassal events, the March one. My opponent, we were in Wedge. My crew was all basically at the point of Wedge, and he, first activation of the game, dropped a shockwave marker into the middle of the Euripides crew, and it was like a target number 12 move duel, and I'd flipped like a 8 for initiative, and I just went, okay, every single one of my models is going to take a point of damage to pass this duel because the effects of the shockwave are worse.
Right.
So I was like, and he was like, but how can you do that? I was like, because this is the only card in my discard pile. Yeah. So I was like, so I'm just going to cycle it round until I get back to this model that isn't Savage, and then I'll flip a card. Yeah. And he was like, sure. But if I flip high on an initiative flip and I've got Ancient Pact in the crew, sure, Ancient Pact is annoying because I'm counting as +1 for my initiative. But if I flip a high card or cheat a high card in to beat your severe card, you can guarantee that one of the first activations, that high card is about to become the swing for whatever model I need to get the use out of. And it just tumbles from there. Even the initiative phase is something you need to take into consideration against Euripides, because if the Euripides player wins and it's a high card, and if it's a tome, you know what Euripides is doing, or you know what. If it's like a 13 of tomes and your master's engaged with Foon, like resign yourself to that master is going into an ice pillar. It doesn't even matter what the intuition is at that point.
And I would imagine, and tell me if I'm wrong here, guys, that part of the second level play is learning to be nimble as a Euripides player, because it sounds like, your flips could change what your activation order is, can change what actions you're going to do based off of high or low flips and how much you're going to be able to utilize or not utilize old ways. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah. I think it's one of the hardest things this is probably the biggest second level play, because you need to know when is changing your activation order worth it and when is it not. And it's the value of the card and the suit of the card and where the threats are on the opponent's side of the board. If you get a good trigger off with your old ways, but you lose Thune before he activates, maybe that's not worth it, or maybe it is. And this is universal to Malifaux, right? But adding the top of your discard pile as another factor in that decision-making process is what makes this hard and is what makes this strong.
No, I completely agree. So I'd be interested to know, Ambrose, what is something I could do at the table or something I could bring to the table that's going to make you go, shit?
So I think even more than Ice Pillar Destruction, bring stuff to get around hard to kill. Ice Pillar Destruction is good, right? And obviously if you've got like Sadir or Mad Dog and you can bring a cheap model that does it well, Soulstone Miners have, pop up, blow it up. Great. And we don't need to talk about how good blowing up destructible terrain is against this crew, right? It's fine. Just don't overtech for it. And the stuff that really drives me nuts is Onslaught and Precise, or ping damage that you could do, like Black Blood, right? You can come in, get something down to the hard to kill, and then without wasting extra resources, kill that model. That is the hardest thing for the Euripides player to deal with, in my experience.
How about for you, Lewis? What are some things that just make our Euripides life harder?
I agree with everything Ambrose just said, but I think the biggest way to give the Euripides player a sad is just put Terrifying in your crew.
Oh, interesting.
It's just like, I've got this 13 here on top of my discard pile. My hand's not great. I want to use that 13 to hit you, But if I have to take a duel before that, I'm flipping the card and getting rid of the 13. So then do I use the 13 to pass the horror duel to maybe just miss the attack anyway? Terrifying is genuinely like the worst thing you can see across the board, in my opinion.
I don't think I would have thought of that, and it makes a shit ton of sense. It really, really does. I mean, I've said this a million times. I think Terrifying is an unbelievably good, underrated ability. And it doesn't feel like, you don't feel it when you're a player that has Terrifying. It doesn't feel as good as it is. Ask your opponent at the end of the battle, what did they think of Terrifying? And trust me, they effing hated it. But it's almost multiplied with against Savage.
Yeah, I think that experience that you just described is multiplied. Like, the Terrifying player might even feel like it's less effective because I'm cheating in a card for like I cheated my 13 for Terrifying, and then I old ways it, and it feels like I'm just getting around it, but it's not. That's a resource that I didn't want to spend that way. And it really makes you use the old ways a lot more. It melts your models a lot more. It makes hard pressure that normally you don't have to deal with.
Very, very interesting. Now, how about on the defensive side, Ambrose, is something that's forcing flips like shockwaves and stuff like that? Is that also something that you worry about, or is like, eh?
It depends on what it is. A lot of times, like, I think the hardest place to be in is a shockwave that's just like 2 damage, right? Because you can get into that situation like Lewis said, where, okay, I'm just going to take 1 damage instead, and that's fine. You can, but if you do pressure enough that there's a 3 on the top of the discard pile and we have to make these flips, it can do it. I think it's much more situational. I don't necessarily think it's better or worse than any other one.
Now, Ambrose, for you, where does terrain come into play when you're thinking about whether you're going to take Euripides or not? Does it ever factor in whether Euripides is going to get picked or not picked?
Definitely. I don't want an open board. And I think this is where people looked at him and said, oh, I'm not going to be able to get around boards. And there's too much clutter on the board is bad for Euripides, all these 50 mils. And I just think that's wrong. And this is where, practice comes in. You have to know how to unpack him. You have to know which models can fit where at the start of the game. But with the ice pillars that you're bringing down, the actions that you're already trying to waste on their turn, the more that you could disrupt that, the better. And I have tools to get around my ice pillars. I can teleport to them with Shattering Surprise. I can turn my models incorporeal. I can eat them with Garyon. And my opponent,
has to tech to it.
Has to tech to it, right? And that's, even if they do tech to it, that means they're teching something, unless they took Soulstone Miner. A lot of times they have to tech something that's not ideal. And that's a good situation to be in. And you can really pack them into their deployment zone and make them work to get out if you ID a good board and play it well.
Lewis, anything else that we need to make sure we talk about here as far as counters or second level? Or did we cover it?
I think on the counter side, another thing that can make, as well as Terrifying, that can make Euripides sad is armor, because he does rely on his high damage tracks, and I've played games where I've just bounced off the Frycle. It's just like, I'm going to throw everything I can at this, and it's just, nothing stuck. Terrain, the more choke points on the board for Euripides, the better for me. The only time I'll ever consider the terrain is if it's corner deployment, because then I'm like, I don't want to put all these 50 mil bases and my opponent is the attacker and they just go, look at that, it's full of buildings, you can't you can't deploy half your models properly or in a way that is going to benefit you.
You need that flexibility.
One thing I do want to say is that if you are up against a Euripides player, because we can use the top card of our discard pile, please give us a chance to decide whether we're doing it or not, because the amount of time, because the amount of times in like real life tournaments, my opponent's just gone, I've got like a 10 where it's like, okay, I might use that. Let me just quickly decide. And then my opponent's gone, I'm on 14. And it's like, well, I know that if I flip that 10 now, I'm on 15. But then I look like a jackass for saying I'm going to do it. So
you're helping the Euripides player is what you're doing.
So it's like, please just give me 2 seconds to decide if I want to use this card and then flip, because I want to keep it fair for both of us. So.
That's a good point.
And that's definitely come up for me too, where exactly the same situation, right? Like they flip and I'm like, well, you literally gave me half a second and I'm just going to pass this now because
no, legit.
I don't know what I was going to decide, but it was definitely on the table.
So that's how you counter them. Don't make their life easier.
Right.
Slow the hell down. That's really funny.
Make them make that decision for sure.
So before we close out, I'm going to take advantage of the fact that I've got both of these good players and good guys on. Real quick, Ambrose, I want a lightning round. I want to hear what you liked the most about the errata and what scared you the most or you were most skeptical about. So first off, what did you think was kind of the biggest thing that you think was needed and you were glad to see?
I'm glad that I can play Dreamer without feeling guilty. And actually same with Serena. I don't like that feeling of going into a crew and having somebody tell me, why didn't you take Serena? And them being right? Like objectively, there's no reason not to take Serena before this patch. And maybe it was a little too far. Who knows? I know some people are upset about how hard she was hit. Some people think that she's just as good. I don't know. I'm just happy that it's a decision that I have to make now, and instead of not.
And the reality is that she's not going to be taken every time. And that was part of the problem, right? So yeah, when you say, I used to take her all the time, but now I'm not going to take her all the time. I'm like, well, that's a success then. That's kind of the idea.
Exactly.
And I think that we might be surprised, especially with some of these schemes where she comes back again, where suddenly she becomes a really good pick. So I'm with you. Which one were you kind of scratching your head about that maybe you're a little questioning?
So there's a couple things that I think they took, and I don't want to criticize the designers. I do. So I think there were a couple of misses where they brought things down for power reasons that hurt the one cool thing about a master. And in particular, I think that Dreamer was one, and I think Levy was the other. Like I said, I'm glad that Dreamer got toned down so that I can play him, but I'm sad that they removed his one cool thing to do that, and instead, it's probably to save printed cards, right? Like I think attacking all the minions, change the Lucid Dream action would have let it still do that cool ramp mechanic in a more balanced way. And instead, they took an easier approach and just said, for balance reasons, this is what we're doing. And I think Levy is similar where, especially on his channel, right? He can no longer burn through his entire health pool in a turn to put out all this irreducible damage. And I think that was his one cool thing that he can't do anymore. So I think those are balanced wins. I think they've achieved what they were trying to do balance-wise, and they filed away their spiky bits. And I just wish that they were leveraging their 21st century tools a little bit better. And, most people are relying on this app to get their cards. You don't need to balance this game like it's 1975.
I think that's legitimate. What'll be interesting to me is the punch that Dreamer got and the punch that Levy got was to attack their cool thing. To your point, Ambrose, I don't think anybody can argue that. What'll be interesting to see is if we see a new play style emerge, right? Whether we see a different layer to Dreamer and a different layer to Levy, or not. It might be that they just, they end up, not popping up as much. How about you, Lewis? What do you think was a big win for the errata?
Colette. Bye, Colette.
So we have video on, and by no means am I nodding and agreeing with you. That's not what's happening right
now. I have anybody who listens who is in any part of the UK like Discord or who was in the Messenger group. You will have seen a time where I have, in full caps rage, just wrote fucking Presto Changeo as an ability. I have lost models to that I felt like I just never should have lost. But yeah, the Colette is for me is a good change. Yanlo was a good change.
I don't think anybody argues that. I agree. Yeah.
Touching on Ambrose's point about the Dreamer, I've seen a lot of online upset about him not being able to summon Stitched anymore. But what people have to remember is that is also a future-proofing in case they want to give Dreamer any new construct toys. They can balance them in a way that you don't have to worry about them being summoned. I'm obviously not privy. I don't know if that's what they want to do, but just look at that as a future-proofing and understand that you could get cool toys in the future that you don't want Dreamer summoning because it would feel bad again.
And it would stop you from having him as an option, right?
Yeah.
And hey, spoiler alert, you can still hire Stitched.
Yeah, and I mean the Widow Weaver still. Yeah, the Widow Weaver. Widow Weaver.
Right, you can still summon it. Yeah.
Widow Weaver does it better anyway. But one thing, and again, I'm the same as Ambrose. I don't want to criticize Weird because I love everything they do, but you can't do what you did to Colette von Stuck, and I'm like with Ambrose, I don't understand the Levy one.
Mm-hmm.
But why is Ophelia still running away around the way that Ophelia is running around? She is honestly my biggest bugbear of this game at the moment, master-wise.
So, Lewis, it's very funny. This is the first time you've been on the show, and it was like the first time I had Ambrose on the show. It was like after I got off the show with Ambrose the first time, I'm like, I agree with Ambrose on a lot of things. You're now in that category, Lewis. Ophelia, I don't understand why people don't talk about her more. I think Ophelia in the right hands is really, really good.
Yeah.
And in great hands, she's devastating. So it's very funny that you mentioned her.
My problem is that she's good in bad hands as well.
She's forgiving. Yeah.
There's like we've said for Euripides, the learning curve for how to use old ways and that sort of stuff is steep. Ophelia's looks like a flat line. It's like you can be actively bad at this game and still win games with Ophelia because her crew does that much. There's people listening
right now. I'm telling you right now, Lewis, a good number of people listening right now do not agree with us on that, and I think they're wrong. I think that she is very, very good, and I think that for whatever reason she just isn't getting played as much. And maybe that'll change. I don't know, but it was just like
it's because they don't want her to change. They're trying to keep that source secret. That's exactly what that's exactly what they're doing. They're just going. That's so funny. If we don't play it, they won't know to change it. So.
Now go back and listen to the deep dive with Ophelia, and you can hear me just going, son of a bitch, man. I mean, she's good. She's good. So that's great. Well, gentlemen, I really appreciate it. Ambrose, it was great to have you back. Lewis, it was great to have you on. I will definitely figure out ways to get you both on again. Lewis, any shout outs or plugs you want to get in?
I just want to give a shout out to my best friend Kai, who does a lot of good work for the Malifaux community. He's him that created Bag of Tools. Mm-hmm. And he's been working non-stop to sort of deal with issues when he's still working through the pandemic. So, and also just want to give him a shout out because I know that Bag of Tools 2 is coming.
Oh, I did not know that.
And a sneaky spoiler for some of the listeners is that Bag of Tools 2 will be fully offline. So that
that's huge.
So that venues that don't have great internet connections are able to be using and running Bag of Tools.
Kai is one of those unsung heroes, right? There's a certain people that have been unsung heroes in Malifaux. I've always considered Kai one of them. It is thankless work. Even when we thank him, we don't thank him enough because Bag of Tools has been a great tool for all of us to have. So yeah, shout out to Kai from me as well. How about you, Ambrose? Any shout outs or plugs?
I second everything for Kai. Like I said earlier, I've been part of the World Series committee for the Vassal events, and Bag of Tools has been, it's an amazing tool, and he has actively worked with us to make sure that we know how to set it up right. It's a little bit different when you're doing a month-long event, and just recently he jumped through some hoops to give us some better drop features. So he's not necessarily on Vassal a lot, but he's going above and beyond to support the community. So
with the drop features, he wasn't aware that there was a time scale for it, and he was just like, "Oh, so when do you need me to do this for, Lou?" And I was like, "I don't know, like 3 hours ago." And he was like, "Oh, you sound like my boss from work." I was like, "Cool."
I was just about to say, he's a dev. He's wicked used to that. And
he that was at like 3:00 in the afternoon on the Monday, and then by like 7 p.m. our time Monday night, he messaged me and he was like, "Right, test that it's working for me," and it was sorted. So.
Well, you know who else is an idiot this way? And I mean that in the nicest possible way. Is DZ is the same way, who makes the Malifaux app. He was I'm not going to mention that. It's thankless work that DZ does as well, in many ways.
Well, he gets pestered so much by people in this community, and he handles it like a champion.
And for those of you that don't know DZ, he cares about that app more than he should, is probably the best way to put it. And he really does, and it shows. I've tooted his horn a few times, but I have yet to see a mini game with the app that we have. Mm-hmm. In fact, I would argue that if you are talking to people about Malifaux and trying to get them into it, just have them download the app, and they're gonna, regardless of what they're playing now, they're gonna go, "Holy crap!" Like this is amazing. We're spoiled.
I do feel sorry for him with the new hiring rules, though, with the masters. Like he's got a thankless project coming there, and yep. I don't know him, so my respect goes out to him for everything he gives us with the app as well.
No, I agree, and it and see what's cool about DZ is that, well, it's, or psychotic, depending on how you look at it, is he's going to do it because it's just going to bug the shit out of him, right? Like he's got a pride in his work that I think shows. So so Kai and DZ, you're the stars of the Savage Keyword Deep Dive, apparently. But if you're not Kai and you're not DZ and you listened all the way to the end, I appreciate you listening. Take care. Hey, did you hear that? You leveled up. You finished another episode of Tabletop Talk from Third Floor Wars. If you want more from the third floor, follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Head on over to our YouTube channel. It is packed with painting tutorials, gaming tips, battle reports, and role-playing actual plays. Did you enjoy this episode? Why don't you send a link to one of your friends so they can enjoy it too? Last but not least, write us a review on your podcatcher of choice. This helps us find listeners almost as cool as you. This is a good thing. We've covered a lot of both of this already. So I think that we can keep this shorter than we normally have. Yeah. I like it when these things are peppered throughout the episode. So good job on that. We'll start with you, Lewis. Let's talk about some things. What second level play is. I don't need to explain it to you. All right, I'll get us started. Within the crew as well, so that becomes a double whammy. Give me just 1 second, guys. What's up, bub? Sorry about that, guys.
No, that's fine. I love that eye roll of Dad's doing Malifaux stuff again.
It's like, Dad, are you recording again?
That's why I say I mitigated that. It's my nephew's birthday, so I kicked the wife out of the house. I was like, go see our nephew. I was like, I'm recording.
Yeah. All right, I'll bring us back. I apologize.
No,
so now that we've got a better sense of your good first segment, gents.
Oh, thank you.
I'll probably start with you, Ambrose.
Sure.
And then we'll just bounce back and forth and just talk. Sound good?
How much do you want me to read off abilities and what they do? Like, I guess that's
not a whole lot. Just because people can have the cards, you
Yep.
know, people can read the cards. You know, it. The idea is you know, I want someone listening to be able to walk away understanding Euripides, not being able to recite
right.
Euripides. Does
Sure.
that make sense?
Yep,
Mhm.
totally.
All right. Hey, are you still here? Look, the podcast is over. And you sat through all of the breaks and bloopers? Well, I mean, if you're here, might as well run over to patreon.com and become a supporter. Don't forget to rate and review this podcast too while you're at it, on whatever platform you're listening to. I do appreciate you sticking around. Take care.